This video is brought to you by Brilliant. This week, the House of Representatives is due to vote on the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, the mega bill recently approved by the House Budget Committee that nominally includes all of Trump's extravagant campaign promises. Now, most of the media's attention has understandably been focused on the enormous tax cuts in the bill, including an extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts, as well as cuts to taxes on tips and overtime, which threaten to widen America's already enormous fiscal deficit and have stoked unrest among fiscally conservative Republicans. However, buried deep within the 400-page bill is a proposed 5% tax on remittances, which, if it were to actually happen, would be potentially catastrophic for smaller Latin American economies like Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, where remittances represent something like a quarter of their GDP. So in this video, we're going to take a look at this new tax, why Trump likes it, and how it could bankrupt much of Latin America. If you're a TLDR fan and want to support the channel, then consider picking up a copy of our magazine. Too Long helps to fund all of our journalism and allows us to make free videos on YouTube like this one. You can learn more and buy a copy by clicking a link in the description. So let's start with a bit of context. For those of you who don't know, a remittance is a non-commercial transfer of money from a foreign worker back to their home country. This is usually when people from poorer countries move to richer countries to find work and then send the money they earn back to support their families at home. Unsurprisingly, given the strength of its economy, the US has long been the top remittance sending country in the world, with a total outflow of about $80 billion in 2022, according to World Bank data, roughly double that of second-place Saudi Arabia. These remittances go to countries all around the world, including China, India, and Nigeria. But a lot of this money goes to Latin American countries too, because they're geographically nearby, and lots of Latin American migrants travel to the US looking for work. Anyway, the proposed policy in Trump's Big Beautiful Bill would tax any remittances sent back by non-citizens, which would include those holding legal work visas or green cards, at a rate of 5%. Now, to be fair, this isn't an entirely new idea. Oklahoma has a law that imposes a $5 tax on remittances under $500 and a 1% tax on all transfers over $500, and that's been in place since 2009. According to the National Conference on State Legislatures, a number of other states have also at least considered comparable legislation, although ultimately decided that such a tax just wouldn't be worth it, given that it would be difficult to enforce and would only raise a bit of revenue. Similarly, Trump tried to implement a 2% remittances tax during his first term, framing it as both a way to raise revenue and discourage immigration. And in 2023, J.D. Vance introduced the Withholding Illegal Revenue Entering Drug Markets, or WIRED Act, to Congress, which proposed a 10% tax. Now, Trump will presumably frame this new 5% tax in a similar way, as a way of both deterring further immigration and creating a new source of revenue for the federal government. But if it does happen, it would be pretty terrible news for the countries that rely on these remittances. Countries like Mexico and India, which receive tens of billions of dollars in remittances each year, would obviously be hurt. But the worst affected countries would be smaller states in Central America, where remittances fuel a large fraction of all economic activity. Nicaragua, for instance, receives remittances equivalent to 28% of their GDP, Honduras 26%, and El Salvador 24%. These remittances both allow countries to pay for imports and drive domestic demand. Considering only about a third of Central American migrants are naturalized citizens, a significant drop in remittances could be terrible for their economies. And this could all be further exacerbated by an economic slowdown in the US, which would push up the unemployment rate for migrant workers, especially in low-paid sectors like construction, manufacturing, and transportation. The IMF estimated earlier this year, for instance, that a doubling of the Salvadorian migrants' unemployment rate from 3.5% to 7% would lead to a drop in remittance inflows equivalent to a massive 6% of the country's GDP. And this would be particularly rough for El Salvador and President Bukele, who's pitched himself as a Trump mega fan and is currently letting the US dump deportees in the Salvadorian prison system, only to be rewarded with a policy that would almost definitely push El Salvador into recession. In more bad news for Bukele, earlier this year the IMF forced him to end his so-called Bitcoin experiment, which was basically about turning Bitcoin into a legal tender in El Salvador as part of a new loan agreement. As a result, the private sector no longer has to accept Bitcoin, the government doesn't guarantee convertibility, and taxes must be paid in dollars rather than Bitcoin, which is why crypto accounts for something like only 2% of all remittances. This is pretty rum timing, because even if you think that Bukele's Bitcoin experiment was indeed a bad idea in the first place, it's hard to deny that it would have presented an easy way for Salvadorians to get around any new remittance tax. Now, to be clear, there's still a good chance that this law doesn't actually happen, because there's a lot of congressional wrangling that needs to be done before the big beautiful bill becomes law, and it'll probably get challenged by the courts anyway, given that it looks a lot like a form of double taxation. After all, migrant workers are already being taxed on their income, and then being taxed again on the same income they send abroad. The Trump administration will probably also realize that there's a risk that this policy actually increases immigration into the US overall, because if the slump in remittances causes a sufficient economic slowdown in Central and South American countries, more people will start coming to the US for work. Nonetheless, if there's one policy area where Trump has been as radical as he promised during the campaign, it's immigration, and this feels like a classic Trump policy. Not only does it promise to deter migrants, it also provides the federal government with a new source of revenue that's not coming from American citizens, in the same way that Trump wants tariffs and his so-called External Revenue Service to offset some of America's fiscal pressures. As a final thing, another reason the policy will be interesting is that it will be the first explicit and direct tax on capital flows, that is, money flowing across borders, that the US has introduced in quite some time. Really, since the early 70s, the US has been one of the world's most vocal proponents of free capital flows, allowing money to flow in and out of the United States and pushing other countries to do the same. However, in the past couple of months, we've seen some speculation about the Trump administration changing course and imposing some kind of capital controls, probably on money coming into the US, in order to reduce America's trade deficit and accelerate its reindustrialization. While this remittance tax is clearly motivated by anxieties about immigration rather than to restructure the global trading order, it could open the door to some more radical capital controls in the future. If you're engaged with complex topics like these, it's probably fair to say that you're at least somewhat interested in improving yourself through interesting, engaging online learning. If so, you'll be interested in this week's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is a learning app designed to help you understand topics from the ground up, on everything from maths to science to AI. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you actually play with concepts, a method that's proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. To add to this, their app is designed to help you learn wherever you are, with fun, hands-on lessons that you can do whenever you have the time. So instead of mindlessly scrolling on social media, you can get smarter in a few minutes each day. For instance, Brilliant's newly updated science course helps you make sense of our universe at entry level, from the mechanics of simple machines all the way up to black holes. The course helps you better understand the world we live in by explaining the physical principles that drive modern technology, while helping you develop your scientific intuition through visual, interactive problem solving. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. By doing so, you'll get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out.